Daniel Sports Central. We go for our 2022 college football predictions for the UCLA Bruins, one of the top teams in the Pac-12 in the 2021 season, as this team went 8-4 overall. But how this team be in 2022, that's what we go over here today. We'll be analyzing this team and predict their schedule game by game in this video, starting out with your team trends. UCLA 8-4 last season wasn't a bad season for the Bruins. They were 4-2 in their first 6, 4-2 in their last 6 in the 2021 season. So, I mean, this team was fairly consistent last season, and I feel like this team was a bit overlooked too. I mean, you had Oregon and Utah, the two big highlights out of the Pac-12 last season. And UCLA, this is a talented team. They were a good football team, and I mean, they got selected to the Holiday Bowl, and unfortunately, that game was canceled last season. They were supposed to play NC State. That would have been a really good matchup there. I feel like both teams, it would have been a very competitive one, but once again, in the end, I mean, it just couldn't happen. But UCLA, they beat LSU 30-27. That was a huge win to start the season. I mean, LSU, an SEC opponent coming to town. I mean, that was a big win there, and UCLA took care of them in what was their second game, even though it was in week 1, because UCLA did play in week 0 last season. They beat Washington 24-17 on the road. They lost to Oregon by 3. Kept that game close, but in the end couldn't quite beat the Ducks there, so they took a loss. And then, of course, they lost to Utah on the road the next week by 20. That game wasn't quite as close. Beat USC on the road 62-33. That was a shootout, and they also beat Cal to finish out the regular season 42-14 was their final score there. So, I mean, this team, they took a couple of close losses, a couple of close, difficult losses. I mean, that Fresno State loss, which was their third game of the season, they lost to them by 3, and that certainly was a game that UCLA was certainly, I mean, they were favored in that game. They should have won it. That could have been a huge win, and would have set this team up for a 3-0 start. And, of course, they beat Stanford the next week, but in the end, 8-4 was the record for this team. But looking at your roster going into next season, your return starting quarterback Dorian Thompson-Robinson. DTR is coming back for this team last season, and he's an experienced quarterback now. This is going to be his 5th season coming up here with UCLA, and he's played consistently over the past 4. And I mean, he has played fairly well. I mean, his touchdown interception ratio is it was the best that it's ever been in 2021, as he put up a 21-6 touchdown interception ratio. He had 2,400 yards on the season, as well as 62% completion rate. So, I mean, his 2021 season was actually pretty good. 2019 was his other really good season, putting up 21 touchdowns. And, I mean, even in 2020, his touchdown interception ratio back then was pretty good, even though his yardage, he didn't put up many yards because, of course, the Pac-12 barely even had a season in 2020. Your returner's top running back, Zach Charbonnet, he's coming back. He's definitely a player to keep an eye on. Last season, he put up 1,300 yards, 13 touchdowns as well. So, yeah, Charbonnet, definitely a player to keep an eye on going into next season. You do lose Britton Brown, your second running back from last season, who put up over 700 yards and 7 touchdowns. But once again, you do return your top there. So, I'd say the backfield looks pretty good. Receiving core, you lose your top receiver in Kyle Phillips. You also lose your second receiving tight end, Greg Dulcich. So both of them, of course, had impacts in this team last season. Phillips put up over 700 yards, 10 touchdowns, and Dulcich put up just over 705 touchdowns last season. So you do lose those two, but you do return Chase Cota and Kazmir Allen as well. You're losing your second receiver, Chase Cota. He is transferring out, unfortunately, for this team going to next season. So you also lose him. You lose your top 3 in receiving going to next season, but you return your third receiver there, once again, in Kazmir Allen. So he's going to be the top returner in the receiving core. He put up just over 300 yards of total offense, 5 touchdowns last season. So at least you got somebody who shows some big upside there in him. But of course, yeah, Cota, losing him is unfortunate for this team. But I do like the depth in the receiving core. I'd say it looks pretty good going to next season. I'm not terribly concerned, even though, of course, I mean, losing your top 3 receivers from last season, there will be some holes to fill for sure. You lose 3 on the offensive line, 2 defensive linemen, 1 linebacker, and 4 in the secondary. So you do lose a few starters on the defense. That'll certainly make an impact. But I think in general, this team, they show some potential. I like how this team looks. I really like DTR. I feel like he's a quarterback that is a bit overlooked, and I understand he's a bit inconsistent at times, but I mean, he also, you got to consider too, I mean, he's pretty good about not turning over the ball, but he also has a really good rush. I mean, he rushed for 610 yards and 9 touchdowns last season. So, I mean, he is a key player for this offense, and defensively there's a couple of question marks, but overall I feel pretty good about this team. I like the depth that's here and what's coming back. Brings up the question, potential major Pac-12 contender in 2022. I mean, Utah and Oregon are my top two in the Pac-12 for sure. I feel like USC probably won't be far behind. I do think USC is a team where, I mean, some people are saying they're overrated. I don't think they are. I feel like there's tremendous potential there for them. But yeah, USC, Utah, and Oregon, I feel like are the big three of the Pac-12, but UCLA is not far behind. This is a team that I feel like certainly is very capable of being a big contender in the conference next season. Transfer portal and recruiting now going to next season. You do lose Jay Shaw, defensive back to Wisconsin. You bring in a few players, though. You got Mwasau coming in, linebacker from Hawaii, if I'm pronouncing that right. And you also got Latu, edge rusher, coming in from Washington. You bring in Mukayo, receiver from UCF, and Hearn, defensive back from Wyoming. But you do lose Savea, defensive lineman to Arizona. Also Taylor Warnell, an offensive lineman and a safety. And you also lose, once again, Jay Shaw, who is off to Wisconsin. Chase Cota, once again mentioned him, he's off to Oregon. You're bringing in O'Neal, offensive tackle from Rutgers. You also bring in defensive lineman from Harvard, Jacob Sykes. And you also bring in the Murphy brothers, two edge rushers from North Texas, Gabriel Murphy and Grayson Murphy. You lose a few other players on the defense here. Of course, Agud, defensive lineman, is off to Miami. Same with Caleb Johnson, linebacker, and an edge rusher is off to Cal. Recruiting-wise, 61st in the nation, 9th in the Pac-12, so nothing too outstanding. You got 6 4-stars coming in and then 5 3-stars. But that said, let's look at your schedule now going into next season. You got Bowling Green to start off your season, Alabama State after that, and then South Alabama in week 3. So your first 3 games are incredibly winnable. I mean, you should go 3-0 to start off the season, or else I'd be concerned, because I mean, Bowling Green, Alabama State. I mean, Bowling Green is in general a pretty terrible team, and then South Alabama, of course, isn't much better, and Alabama State's an FCS opponent. Then you got Colorado, your first conference game there on the road, then Washington and Utah both at home. You go on a road trip to Oregon after your bye, Stanford at home, Arizona State on the road, Arizona at home, USC at home, and then Cal to finish off the season on the road. So, I mean, this schedule sets up pretty well. I like this schedule. I mean, you got Utah at home, you got USC at home, you got Oregon on the road, but that's after your bye week, so you got some rest before that matchup. So I think things look really good for UCLA schedule-wise going into next season to definitely get a high number of wins. But looking at September here, first 3 games, all easy wins. I think UCLA takes care of all 3 of those opponents by at least 14 points. Once again, Bowling Green, Alabama State, South Alabama, all are teams that UCLA should definitely take care of just fine. And then Colorado on the road. I think the Buffaloes are one of the worst teams in the Pac-12 next season. With it being on the road, though, I will make that game a close one, but I'm still going to definitely favor UCLA. So you start the season 4-0, as should definitely happen. And looking at your October here, well, Washington is a game in September. That game is on a Friday, I believe, so it's just before the Saturday where all the other games are taking place. But you got, so Washington, that is going to be a home game, but I am going to favor the Huskies there. I think Washington is a team that I don't see them winning the North Division, but I do think that Washington gets 7 to 9 wins next season. So I do want to favor the Huskies there in that matchup in a close one. That's kind of the one game where I think that game could easily go either way. I mean, UCLA is a team that could definitely win that game, but I'm gonna take Washington in what would be kind of a surprising loss, but certainly it's gonna happen. Then you got Utah the week after that. I'm actually gonna favor the Bruins against Utah. That's gonna be one of 2 losses that I'm predicting for the Utes. I think Utah goes in, and they end up taking a close loss there to UCLA. But what you could say as well, I feel like UCLA is going to win against either Washington or Utah. They're not going to win both games, but they're going to win one of those and lose one of those. It's just a matter of who. And as of right now, I'm going to take UCLA to actually upset Utah and lose to Washington the week before. And then you got Oregon on the road after your bye. I am going to favor the Ducks there. I'm pretty confident in that one. I do think Oregon is the team to favor in that matchup. I feel like the Ducks are, they're going to be a good team next season. I feel like I'm more comfortable saying that Utah is going to be a big contender, but in the end, I'm gonna favor the Ducks in that matchup. Then you got Stanford coming to town. I'll favor UCLA there in a close one. So you're 6-2 heading into November, which I'd say is a pretty good situation. Arizona State on the road, another winnable game, but it's on the road, and I'm going to favor the Sun Devils there in a close one. Sun Devils, I could see them 7-8 win range next season. And then you got Arizona at home, easy win. USC and then Cal to finish out the season. I'm going to favor you against USC there, so that could potentially be an upset win. But yeah, certainly that'd be a great win there if you can beat them. You got them at home, right where you want them. You get the win there in a close one. And then Cal to finish out the season. I'll put that game in yellow, but I'll definitely favor the Bruins there. So 9-3 is my record prediction for UCLA. I am very comfortable picking an 8-4 or a 9-3 record for UCLA. It's just a matter of what games this team is going to lose in. So, I mean, they're going to lose 3 or 4 of their games, I do think, next season. It's just a matter of which ones. In this case, I've got Washington, Oregon, and Arizona State being losses, but it could easily be, say, Utah, Oregon, and USC. And you do win against Washington and Arizona State, but in this situation, this is what I'm going to do. I do think UCLA is kind of a dark horse contender, and they do pull off a couple of big upsets next season. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below on UCLA, and I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.